All right, so you're a 4th gen Toyota Highlander owner. Began in 2019 and goes to the present year of 2022. All you've had to do is change the oil, maybe an air filter, maybe some tires, maybe some brakes, and everything's been wonderful. Now it's time to start thinking about some long-term maintenance items. Let's get into it. All right, one of the things I always suggest to any new car owner is that you familiarize yourself with where everything is located under the hood. So if you are a first-time Toyota Highlander owner, particularly the 4th generation, this happens to be our 2021 Toyota Highlander. We have just over 16,000 miles. There's not a whole lot that needs to be done to this vehicle at this point, but what I will do is we'll go over a quick reference of where everything is located so that you can get a general idea of what to be watching for and begin to think about your maintenance down the road. All right, the first thing we'll do is we'll start over here on the driver's side of the vehicle, and you're going to see that you have your brake fluid reservoir is right by the fender. And just in front of that, you have a relay and extra fuse panel, an electrical panel. And just beside that, you have the engine's electronic control module here. And just beside that, you have your main starting battery. All right, just in front of the starting battery, you have the air filter. The air filter housing is inside here, just below this piece right here. I've shown this to people before, and we'll quickly cover it. If you need to access underneath the engine cover, it just simply pops on. You have a little pin here, pin here, pin locator here, and a pin locator here. And you just line these little points up right there with those little pins, and it just pops back on. So if you would like to take an inspection underneath there and take a look around, that's all there is to removing that. All right, moving on. This is your main coolant where you check what's actually inside the radiator. If the vehicle has been run, do not open this cap. Over here on the passenger side fender, you will see that you have the coolant overflow reservoir, and it is actually labeled as full cold and full hot, and you can keep an eye on your coolant level watching this reservoir. If the vehicle has already been cranked and it's warm and you can't open it, you can get a basic reference point from this tank. This very simply is where you check the engine oil. Been on the cars since the beginning of cars. Now, there are some models of automobiles out there that they are beginning to do away with the dipstick. This is not a good idea in my mind, but there are auto manufacturers that are going away from the dipstick. And oil fill right here. So if you find that your engine oil level is low, this is where you will add it. All right, so there's your basic tour underneath of the 4th gen Highlander. Now, let's talk about a few things. If you own a 2019 Toyota Highlander and you have not replaced the main cranking battery of your automobile, that battery is approaching 3 years old. What I have seen happening with batteries is that they just don't last like they used to. Whereas you used to could get, say, 5 or 6 years out of a battery without a whole lot of hassle. Anymore, 3 to 4 years is about the maximum you're going to get out of a battery. So my recommendation is once your battery reaches about 3 years old, you really need to get in there and have it tested properly and evaluate whether that battery needs to continue to stay in your vehicle. After 4 years, my recommendation is don't even test it. Don't even worry about it. Look at it as a maintenance item. Just put a new battery in it. I was on YouTube this morning and I was watching a video by the Car Care Nut. If you're not familiar with this channel, and specifically if you have Toyota products, You probably ought to go over and check his stuff out. Very good guy. I was watching his video this morning, and we have a very similar thought on automotive cranking batteries. They are essential for maintaining a longer alternator life and a longer starter life. Once they begin to get weak, it causes your alternator to have to charge harder and creates more heat, and thus shortens the life of your alternator. How it shortens the life of the starter is it actually slows the engagement of the starter down, and you have a starter solenoid, so that starter solenoid contacts come together slower, and as they're coming together slower, when they make contact, it begins to burn the contacts in that solenoid, repeatedly cranking it with a low battery. Okay, what you want is that contact to slam shut and that starter to begin to activate. So always keep a good hot fresh battery in your ride. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is your engine's air filter. This needs to be changed approximately once a year, and that is based on mileage. The average American drives about 15,000 miles a year, so it is good advice just to go ahead and throw a new air filter in your car. Keep it breathing and keep it getting the right amount of air, and keep all the air going into the engine as clean as possible. Which brings me to another air filter that is often overlooked, is the vehicle's cabin air filter. This car has a cabin air filter, like I said, that should be changed once a year. The cabin's air filter helps to eliminate any dust and contaminants coming inside of the car. I know that in aftermarket they make different style filters to help filter out different kinds of allergens and other kinds of things, but those are out there in the aftermarket. You can go out and do a little research and find something, particularly if you suffer with allergies and such, that can help you eliminate what's coming inside your vehicle, which can get into your vent system and aggravate your allergies. Nothing more aggravating than getting your allergies all flared up 2 or 3 times a year, and that can help. All right, so let's talk about your brake fluid. Brake fluid is probably one of the most overlooked fluids on the vehicle. People check the level and just move on. But if you're driving a 2019 4th gen Toyota Highlander, that fluid is approaching 3 years old. It is suggested that you change your brake fluid every 2 years. That doesn't mean just siphoning what's in this container out and replacing it. It means siphoning what's in this container out, replacing it with fresh fluid, and then pushing that fluid out each caliper until fresh fluid is into the entire system. Reason for that is brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning that it absorbs moisture from the air. The moisture in the brake fluid can cause corrosion, it can cause a bad pedal feel, and it can compromise the vehicle's ability to stop. So every 2 to 3 years it is recommended that you change your brake fluid. All right, so that brings us to our last 2 topics that we're going to discuss today, and we talked about your coolant level, but we did not talk about service interval. The 4th gen Highlanders, as far as I know, are all equipped with the pink coolant. The pink coolant is good for 5 years or 100,000 miles. Now, the average American drives their vehicle on average 15,000 to 20,000 miles a year. That's a rough estimate. So if you own a 4th gen and you're coming into your 3rd year of ownership, chances are you may only have 45 to 60,000 miles, and your coolant probably doesn't need to be serviced. Just make sure that your overall inspection to make sure nothing's leaking and that the level is where it's supposed to be, and you should be good to go with coolant for a while longer. If you're one of those people that drives a lot of highway miles and your mileage has crept up and you're getting close to 100,000 miles, yeah, you probably need to go ahead and look into having your coolant flushed and serviced and get some fresh coolant in there. It really means the life of your engine. It really helps keep those head gaskets doing what they're supposed to do, cuts down on all the corrosion and stuff that can happen inside of your engine. So, but if you're under that threshold, carry on, you're doing fine. And that brings us to our last piece of information I have for you today. That is the transmission. The transmission, as I said, average American, 15 to 20,000 miles. You're probably getting close to time to need to service your transmission. My 21, like I said earlier, has I think around 16,000 miles, just a tick over. I'm nowhere near needing to get it done yet. But if you're in a 19, chances are you might be getting close. At least close enough to thinking about it. Now, let's move on to the high mileage driver. Somebody who may have driven their Toyota Highlander who's over 100,000 miles and 120,000 miles, and you haven't really ever thought, man, I really need to get my transmission serviced. Or somebody may have even actually told you, oh, that's a sealed lube for life transmission. You don't ever have to do anything to it. Don't go back to that person that told you that to service your vehicle for anything, because that is not the truth. Toyota, on their website, says, and in the owner's manual, at 60,000 miles, you should have your transmission fluids serviced. And I want to address the people that maybe have gone way past that, or say you're into 120,000 miles now, and you go, wow, I didn't know I was supposed to get my transmission fluid serviced way back at 60,000 miles. Don't panic. There's nothing to worry about. If your vehicle is functioning properly, the transmission is shifting, you're not having any issues, it's safe to go ahead and change the transmission fluid. No problems. There's a myth out there that says that if you wait too long to change your transmission fluid, that you should just ride it out until it quits working and never change it. That is a myth. With this caveat, if the transmission is performing and doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, and you're not having any issues with it, have the transmission serviced, and it will continue to do what it's supposed to do. If your transmission is not shifting properly, it is not doing what it's supposed to do, it is recommended that you find out why the transmission is beginning to fail, whether that be due to dirty fluid or whether that be due to an internal mechanical failure, possibly due to lack of maintenance. But do not automatically assume that because you have a lot of miles on it that it should not be serviced. That is just a myth. Alright, well, that's just a basic overview and a few maintenance items that you might want to take a look at on your 4th Gen Highlander. Like I said, it's 2019 until the current year, 2022, with these Highlanders. And some of the first ones that were released, it's getting close to time to have to start thinking about doing some maintenance other than changing your engine oil. So that'll give you a little reference. What I'm going to do is down in the description, I'm going to post a link to Toyota's website that shows you what the maintenance intervals are supposed to be. You don't even have to get in your book. All you have to do is select the type of vehicle you have, the year model, what engines you have, and it will break down each maintenance item and what they recommend and when they recommend to do it. Thanks for coming by the Real World Garage. I hope this has been helpful for you to help keep your 4th Gen Toyota Highlander running and reliable for many years to come.